So hello everyone. Today our groups are going to present about a plot and point of view of interpreter of melodies. Before that, we are going to introduce our group members. Here we are. Okay, so before we discuss about the plot and point of view, Interpreter of Melodies is a short story by American author. The name is Jhumpa Lahiri. The story reflects their attempts to bridge the gap between the two cultures. They are Indians and Indian Americans. So, the plot here is an Indian American family of 5 from America went to a trip in India with Mr. Kapasi as their tour guide, who also works with a doctor as an interpreter of his patients during weekdays. He took the interpreting job as a way to pay the medical bills when his eldest son got typhoid and died at age 7. Mr. Kapasi, an old man who had been married to a woman with no love interest, begins fantasizing about Miss Das, as she said that she was romantic because of Mr. Kapasi's work. Unfortunately, Mr. Kapasi was dumbfounded when Miss Das, spilled her shocking secrets to him, and eventually Mr. Kapasi's interest on her begins to disappear. And then Miss Das asks Mr. Kapasi for a remedy for her wounds, but it turns out Mr. Kapasi insulted her and made her pissed off, then went to her family in the hills. Meanwhile, Bobby was attacked by a group of monkeys in the hills because of the scattered puffed rice that Miss Das accidentally dropped when she went off from the car.
Moving to the next one is point of view. We are going to talk about the point of view of Interpreter of Melodies by Jhumpa Lahiri. Interpreter of Melodies is told from the third-person limited omniscient point of view. That is, the story is told by the narrator who reveals the perceptions of Mr. Kapasi's perceptions, but not those of the other characters. Events in the story primarily were revealed a lot in Mr. Kapasi, not Mrs. Das or Mr. Das. So for example, when the characters leave the taxi at the temple, the narrator follows Mr. Kapasi, who walks ahead so as not to disturb Mrs. Das, and does not show us what Mrs. Das is doing until she again enters Mr. Kapasi's view. Even the character's name reflects the focus of Mr. Kapasi. Instead of calling Mrs. Das by her first name, Mina, as both her husband and her children do, the narrator mentions only by the name Mrs. Das, which is how Mr. Kapasi sees her. The narrator does not disclose any information that Mr. Kapasi wouldn't know. By using this point of view, Jhumpa Lahiri, the narrator, limits the scope of our knowledge about the Das family and emphasizes the disconnection between Mrs. Das and Mr. Kapasi. Although he is quickly drawn to Mrs. Das with emotion, but as the plot continues, Mr. Kapasi begins to think differently. Mr. Capuzzi is enlightened by observing the family and hearing Mrs. Daz's story about her affair. Mr. Capuzzi then begins to realize maybe his humble, simple life is not so bad compared to the twisted problems of the Daz family. So, any other connection between them is only in his mind. It is quite an interesting story actually, of how one's feeling can change in such a short time. Well, so that was our group's plot and point of view analysis of Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Melodies. Thank you for your attention and thank you for watching. Goodbye.